So last season, the Crimson Tide had several freshmen able to contribute in some capacity or another, and because of that, the natural question, in my opinion, must be asked, and that's which one of these individuals are poised to take major steps going into year two? Another year in the program, another spring practice to go through, gaining more familiarity is only a net positive, and I'm interested to see which one of these talented individuals is poised to take over in their sophomore season. Before we break this down, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes, N for no. Do you believe we will see Alabama sophomores taking over and really establishing themselves in the national college football sphere? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, like and comment down below. Those interactions are massive to content creators such as myself, and both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. However, with all that being said, we need to hop right into this, and I'm going to start with a name that is very easy to put on this list and really answers the question I asked in the intro, which is, do you believe that we will see some of these Alabama sophomores play their way into the national spotlight? And the answer for me is going to be yes, of course, and I can start with none other than Dallas Turner, who already did that as a true freshman. But now you're talking about another year in the program, another year in the strength and conditioning. The sky is truly the limit for Dallas Turner. And one of the things when I talk about Dallas Turner that we need to account for is if Alabama is able to find a way to replicate the production they got in the interior, we've talked about this before, there are several different names to know that we could see really take a major jump in terms of interior defensive linemen making a contribution. But I digress, because if Alabama is able to fill the shoes left in the middle, you're talking about a dangerous defensive front that already contains the best edge rush duo in the nation, in my opinion, whenever we're talking about Dallas Turner and Will Anderson. But because Will Anderson's presence must be accounted for, Dallas Turner is going to find himself with ample opportunities. And I think there's going to come a point in the season where once Alabama's defensive production from the interior really starts feeling itself, that teams aren't going to be able to double anybody. And at that point, you're asking a lot of your offensive line if they have to go one-on-one with Dallas Turner on one side and Will Anderson on the other side. But because of the presence of Will Anderson and because of the presence of Dallas Turner, it alleviates the pressure off the other individual, because an offensive line can't pull all of their attention to one side. If they do that, that's just music to the ears of the other guy, because they know they're in a more advantageous matchup. So Dallas Turner is probably the easiest name to put on this list, and somebody who absolutely deserves to be here, regardless of whether it's someone we all know is set to succeed or not. Dallas Turner belongs firmly on this list. But we need to stay on the side of the defense, because another name that's probably not surprising is Jaquincy McKnight. And McKnight is someone who was able to come in year one and contribute whenever the starting cornerbacks went down with injury. McKnight, a former 5-star out of high school, showed flashes of why so many people around the program are so excited for him. And I think that's only going to continue with another offseason, especially at the cornerback position. It's such a difficult position to play because there's so much to learn, and there's such a massive difference in the way high school offenses are ran and the way college offenses are ran. Not to mention the massive difference in the way a high school secondary is ran compared to a college secondary. So that's a position that takes a lot of growth, and I think McKnight is going to be the beneficiary of that growth in year two. He's a name I'd keep an eye on, especially with the presence of Ricks on the other side. And then you look at the back end, Alabama was very lucky to retain Battle, Helms, and then you see Branch and Moore. Whoever starts at that position, you're very comfortable with. So Alabama's secondary could take a major step as a whole, but the sophomore I want to focus in it is Jaquincy McKnight. However, he is not the only one from that secondary we can talk about, because Terrion Arnold is somebody who has all the ability in the world and can play multiple different positions in the secondary, and as such, I think he's going to be finding his way onto the football field to a large degree this season, especially in dime packages, because he's got such fluid ability, and he can play so many different positions in the secondary. He's someone I think is going to take strides going into year 2. But sticking on the defensive side of the football, and I know we've named a lot of guys already, but there are several sophomores who are competing for starting spots right now, and they need to be talked about. And one of those individuals is none other than Deontay Lawson, who's battling Jalen Moody and others for that inside linebacker position opposite Henry To'o. And this is one we're going to have to watch. Lawson really stood out during last year's A-Day game, and he was somebody a lot of you came to me and said you were impressed with, not only right after A-Day game, but even throughout this season, telling me that you thought he was the next big name for the Crimson Tide. And look, I completely agree, but we cannot dismiss Jalen Moody, somebody who anytime he's gotten the opportunity finds himself at the right place at the right time. Jalen Moody came in and played a game against Arkansas and did very well. He's someone who understands the system because he's been in it for so long, and that understanding, that experience is nothing to sneeze at. That's something we have to watch, and he's also a talented individual. So that's a position battle we have to watch going forward. But as such, the interior of the defensive line is something I've talked about for so long, and there are a lot of sophomores who could contribute there. It's just kind of hard to peg because Alabama will have a heavy rotation at that position, so there are going to be multiple different names. However, look for a sophomore to contribute in some capacity on that defensive front and make a tangible difference. But that shifts us into the offense, and the offense is going to be a bit easier to talk about because I'm going to cheat a little bit when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to name an entire position group, and that is the offensive line and then the wide receiver group. Because when we look at the talent both of those groups have in terms of sophomores, there's a lot of different ways it can go, but it's all about somebody stepping up and seizing the moment. For the wide receiver room, you have Ja'Cory Brooks, you have Ajayi Hall, you have Christian Leary, you have JoJo Earl, all individuals who are poised to take a step up in terms of production this next season. And especially with the loss of 3 wide receivers, those names are names we need to understand and we need to keep at the forefront of our mind. JoJo Earl got some playing time last year, went down with injury. He's someone we probably need to watch at that slot position. But there's a lot of names that are going to be battling in this wide receiver room, and iron sharpens iron, something I'm really hoping will show through this offseason and into next season. Ja'Cory Brooks is someone who became a hero after his catch in the Iron Bowl, a phenomenal catch which sealed the win ultimately for the Crimson Tide. And then Ajayi Hall exploded onto the scene during the A-Day game, but then was silent thereafter. However, that does not diminish the ability Ajayi Hall has, and one of the things I thought was the most intriguing is Ajayi Hall voiced his frustrations on Twitter all last season. However, at the point of the national championship game when Alabama came up short, he went on Twitter and owned those mistakes, apologizing and saying he'd be back. And in my opinion, that was the growing moment so many of you wanted to see. So I think the wide receiver unit as a whole is one we have to watch, but there's going to be battles across the board there. And I just happen to think that some of these sophomores are in a perfect position to fully take advantage of it. But we also need to talk about the offensive line. And as I said, I'm cheating there as well. Because when you look at the offensive line, Alabama got in a class during that 21 cycle that was as good as any offensive line class we've seen in quite some time, with the number 1 tackle in the nation, the number 2 tackle in the nation, the number 2 guard in the nation, and the number 1 center in the nation. So when you look at it like that, there are several different people, and at least in theory, that could contribute to this offensive line. Whether we're talking about J.C. Lathan, Tommy Brockermeyer, Terrence Ferguson, we need to know that there are multiple names that could contribute and really need to contribute. This was a great offensive line haul in terms of recruiting acquisitions. But now with another year into the system, it's time for these guys to start making their steps up in terms of production. And look, I've talked about this at length before. I don't think we as fans really understand how hard it is to make the jump from high school offensive line to college offensive line, where there is such a massive difference in strength, speed, and then just the schematics of the game in general, not to mention the technique required to be successful. So it is a position guys come in, sit for a while to grow, to learn. That's nothing that's surprising. But in year 2, it is going to be paramount that someone steps up. Who's it going to be? We have to remain and see. But with all of that, I cannot wait to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments, as I think there are sophomores poised to make massive jumps, and I can't wait to hear what y'all think. That's it. See ya.